online platform was so that you can be anywhere in the world and still get access. Today, we actually have investors from around 55 countries and we have done zero marketing, right? Which means that anybody from anywhere can actually come on and have an understanding of what's happening. The other part was in terms of education, right? Today, if you look at the platform as well, we have a lot of people like you who are in different stages of their career. You're entrepreneurs or you're maybe senior professionals who actually want to get into investing. We've also been running master classes over the years, right? Starting from day one, they actually started off the sessions, and that's where we're helping create more people get an understanding. And like you said, like Arpit's segment in terms of saying, hey, you know what, if you don't understand the risk, it's okay to not get into it, right? It's not for everybody, and it's completely understandable, because the moment you write the check, you need to write it off. And if you're not comfortable with it, it's okay. And it's okay to not get into it just because it sounds sexy and it's there in papers. So we started off as an early stage platform. Fast forward 7 years now, early stage platform is one part, which is what I head. We also have two other verticals, a SaaS product called My Startup Equity, which is an ESOP and cap table digitization and management. We have another product, or rather another vertical called LB Plus, which is where we look at growth and late stage investments and fund of fund investments and ESOP liquidity. So what we've tried to be there is, can we be there across the spectrum from a C to IPO kind of thing from a startup aspect, and not just be transactional, right? Can we be there across doing other things as well? From an early stage platform perspective, you're right, Gautam. I've seen, I think, tens of thousands, I can say now, also because of my prior VC experience. So we've funded over 350 plus transactions in the last 2 years, right? And last year was actually one of our best 100 plus transactions in the year. So we also have around 6,000 plus angel investors from across the world, right? So we try and see how we can actually get the best of the deals to the investors. There is a marketplace, and you choose as an investor where you want to invest, because at the end of the day, it's still your call. It is, nobody else can recommend and tell you, hey, do it here, unless maybe it's your friend who's actually has that influence over you. But for all other practical purposes, we are a marketplace which helps you with all the information to take that decision.
Absolutely. And sorry for getting the wrong number, tens of thousands of startups, right? I think, what that really brings is the amount of experience that you've had in evaluating startups, right? I think I would love to, dive straight into it, because so we are at a phase where a lot of the investor circle members, like I said, have been attending these sessions for about 2 months now or 3 months now, and without a break, religiously catching up on Saturdays, and
Nice.
the WhatsApp groups also having a lot of conversations. When one of them comes up with a term sheet with one of the startups, we share it there and say, hey, what do you think could be different? How can I protect my interest? So it's a very good community that's building, and something that is definitely picking up is we've started meeting a lot more startups, right? I mean, HeadStart anyways keeps doing the monthly demo days. We've been doing that for years. As investor members, we started, bringing them and exposing them to some of these pitches. And the best thing is some of these are very interesting startups. And now the question is, I may have a bias. I may have a bias because I've been in this profession. I've been in this sector for a very long time, but it may not be the best investment to make. It may be a great company to work for.
Right.
So how do I actually remove that hat and wear the investor's hat, which is new to me? So I would actually, dive straight into that. Something that we've been seeing is evaluation of startups, right? So what are some of the parameters? How do you approach evaluating a startup, in your team at LV? What are the stages that you go through? Maybe we can dive into that and then probably take a couple of examples of sectors.
Sure. What I also do is, I think one part of it is as LV, and I think predominantly it's also about how most of the investors look at it, right? Because for us also, sometimes what happens is we say leave our bias because we are seeing a lot of things maybe. So we also try and leave our bias out, because end of day, it is still somebody else writing the check. So we also make sure that demarcation is there. Whatever said and done, I'll tell you, even if we say there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 metrics, key things which you look for, it is predominantly going to be a founder thing, which is what you bet on, right? All till Series A gets completed is predominantly on founder base. You will look at who the founders are, what their background is, how many guys are there, the whole works, and your bet is on that. You meet, and and to be frank, again, while I think Balram would have told that invest into a company, I also say for the first 3 months, don't invest. Just listen to companies pitch, because it's important for you to understand how people are telling their story. What are other people asking? So you will be able to get a flavor of things. And the more and more companies you actually meet, you will have a gut feeling that you want to back this guy, right? When you hear somebody, you know the conviction of the founders, you know the founder knows in and out of the industry. You know that's where you want to bet, right? So top 1, 2, 3 metrics are actually founding team, is where you will go after, right? And that kind of trumps everything else, to be very frank, because a founding team which is really solid will be able to brave through a lot of other things, right? Company going down, pivots, change, figure something else out, right? You want those kind of passionate drivers and hustlers in your in your portfolio, because that's where everything will actually kind of move into. So the team is going to be your key end of day, whatever said and done, right? So that will be your that key focus. But even in team, I think Gautam, one of the key things is people always ask, how do you evaluate the team, right? It's so subjective. How do you actually go about evaluating the team? There again, I think you will also look at different parts of the team as well as the founding segment. You'll actually evaluate. One is to say, hey, you know what? Does this guy understand the space, right? Is he from the space? You're looking at, say, investing into a SaaS company, and which includes, say, enterprise sales, right? You know it best. You will want to look at somebody who understands sales. You can't knock on a corporate door when you're 22. It's not as easy unless you maybe have somebody who is in your senior management who understands sales, right? So does the team have the right mix of people for you to get the best out of the company, right? So you will evaluate that, do they have the relevant experience for the kind of company? On the other side, say it's a millennial product, you also don't want to invest in somebody who's in 40s, because they don't get it. To be frank, I half the time don't get what half the products are, because I don't use those products, right? So it's important to also see who's developing the product, and are they in the same segment, right? So that relevancy for a particular startup becomes very important, tied to the founder there. Like the founder startup fit is actually very important, right? And thereafter you'll also see, hey, what is it, a single founder, are there multiple founders? There is a bias most of the time that people don't want to be betting on single founders. Now why is that? Because I actually flip it and say it's more from a founder's perspective, right? It's also a very lonely journey. It's a very, very lonely journey then, right? And unless you have somebody else who will be able to shoulder that burden, it's very difficult. So it's important from a founder perspective also to actually have somebody just to shoulder things. But from an investor side, it's more in terms of saying, do they have complementary skill sets, and can they bring different things, right? Is it only all, even if you have 3 people and all are tech guys, you will say, boss, get a 4th co-founder who's a business guy, or the other way around. All are business, get a CTO or a founder who is the tech guy. So it's important to have that mix even in the founder base for you to know that this company will actually do well. Sometimes you'll say, okay, single founder, but get your next level of management who are really strong then, right? Who'll be there as backup, because even if you fall sick for 1 week, the company should run, right? And that is really important even in early stages. So that's where we see these kind of things to say, hey, what, how do I then say, okay, this founder startup fit is also there for me to actually take a call and say, I actually want to go behind this founder. And I think one of the other key things, if you know more than the founder in a startup, you should not invest, right? Because and that's like the founder doesn't know enough of a space is very, very important. If he doesn't know, then it is one of the most difficult things from your end to be able to justify at a later stage.
I think that's a very beautiful point. Of course, one is the founder startup fit, but most importantly, what you meant was the right amount of synergy between the investor and the founder. Yeah. Ensure that as an investor, you don't know too much over the founder, yeah, because then you always have a bias. And yeah, also the case where the founder doesn't know anything, right, yeah, in that space. I think both of these are extremes. But I think like you said, it is very difficult to make these evaluations objective, right? Because to a large extent it is subjective, because like you said, it's founders at the end of the day at this stage.
Yeah.
So at this point, I would probably want to go a bit deeper, because there are a lot of, like you said, a lot of very unique sectors that have been coming up. A lot of products for millennials. A lot of products on products for millennials, right? Say, for example, no one would have thought of building products on TikTok or Insta Reels, in the last couple of years, right? So first of all, those were new products, and there are a lot of products on top of these products that bring in transactions or whatever. So and then of course there's a huge set of other areas in terms of Industry 4.0, EV, mobility, right? These are all picking up. So are there any insights that you would love to give our folks in terms of especially certain niche sectors, certain new sectors, or the sunrise sectors, in terms of evaluating over there? Because at times, you may not have the founders coming with massive experience in that space because it's a totally new sector. So how do you evaluate in those cases?
Yeah, actually, I'll give an example here, right? Or a real time this thing in terms of a very funny thing. 2016, I think we got Meesho on our platform. Okay, he was just starting off. He had some few sellers on Facebook. Nothing much, but he had a thought process that social commerce is going to. He was still building like a product for the Facebook reseller kind of thing, but hopefully becoming bigger and stuff. We sent it to, well, I can't remember. We sent it to all the key investors, right? Not one bit the bullet, right? They said, it's not going to be a big sector. We're not going to invest, right? So everybody makes that mistake. The company is gone like miles ahead today in 4 years' time. But it was a sector where you could think that, hey, what e-commerce had built up, right? That there was a particular way which had happened, and there is something else with the twist which is coming in, right? And you don't know if it'll work or not. To be very frank, you will not know if it'll work. But it's okay to say, hey, let me take a small bet here and see, because there is a potential for growth, right? That, hey, internet is becoming really big. We know e-commerce has already become big. That there were other social angles which were coming into play. So this was somewhere in a mix which came into picture. So it's okay and the point when you're investing is to not think of today, but to think 4 years hence, right? What is the potential for the startup for 4 years hence from now? And that's where you actually want to invest, right? So for us, we can say we missed Meesho. We had the company, but we missed it because the key investors did not think it was going to become big at that point in time, right? But you had to think that, hey, what could be the potential going forward from there? Another thing, also interestingly to be saying, Sharad always, when he runs our sessions, he actually says that, hey, if economic times is coming up with a lot of companies getting funded in a space, means you've already missed the bus, right? Because there are so many people already who have invested, or if VCs are investing, you're already behind there, right? You ideally should have been identifying these companies a year before and investing into them. It's not easy, I know, but the moment there is a sector heat up, it's not going to be easy in terms of getting the best of the companies, because some of them are already caught in, or the wave has already gone one step ahead, right? So that's where I think as an investor, the point is to see, can you relate into things where that going forward it's going to become big, right? Even today, like you were talking of what EV is coming into space, a picture. EV also is very new, right? We don't have the infrastructure in our country at all today, but is there a potential for it to become big? And there are some sectors like EV which is going to be 10 years. It is not going to be a 4-year thing, because there is a lot of government intervention as well as infrastructure which needs to be there, which means there are different layers you need to think of, right? So even if you want to invest where we know that there are these unique new models which are coming in, you will have to then think in this space, it's going to be 10-year timeline, not 4-year timeline in which I will see a bump. That expectation as a investor is also very, very important, to know that when you're getting into something, when will it actually become big? Right.
So I'm going to quickly take a pause, because I've been getting a lot of messages, questions on my direct chat. So I'm going to quickly pause, unmute one or two questions, and we'll again get back to a few questions.
Sure.
Vinayak, probably I'll start with you. Would you be able to unmute yourself and ask your questions?
Yeah, so I had a question on Meesho. I want to talk about the founders. Using that lens, right? Like, what was so different about the Meesho founders that maybe in hindsight would have signaled that they would be successful, or maybe when they actually pitched at you, maybe they weren't that maybe sophisticated or whatever, and then over a period of time they built that understanding of the market. So I just wanted to understand that as a use case, because again, like, it's one of the companies that has done well.
Right.
Hindsight, obviously there are two trends, like e-commerce and like WhatsApp, or social media.
Yeah.
And it's kind of seems in hindsight, branded that kind of marrying the two together should work. But
Right.
I just want to know, like, what was the evaluation of the founder and the founding team at that point of time, and even if maybe it was wrong, maybe what changed, between them, and what kind of made them successful in your opinion.
Sure. Vinayak, I think, well, I actually spoke of only the team and the founding thing. I will just also add the 2-3 other things, right? Which normally you will look for when you're evaluating. Market size, which is there. You will look at scalability. You will look at traction sometimes, depending on the space. You will then also look at differentiation, right? These are all the things which will actually come into picture when you're evaluating. Now, in Meesho's case, Vidit was a guy who actually, I think, was very assertive, and he knew what he was doing, and he was also somebody who had the vision of what it could potentially become, right? The point is to be able to understand the founder's vision. End of day, if you are in sync with the founder's vision, is where you will also be able to invest into the companies, right? If you don't match that vision, then you actually can't invest. So the thought process is, okay, does the founder know what he's doing, and what is it that he's thinking? He's also actually changed quite a few things, right? Like I said, when he came, he was trying to build a tool for Facebook reseller kind of a segment. But the thought process was, he was already thinking that there is a social angle, right? Which means you knew there was the point there, Vinayak, is one, the founder was trying to capitalize on a trend which was actually going on, where e-commerce had already, become really big. Internet was becoming bigger, right? I think that was the key thing, right? You knew that the digital divide was actually going down. There was a lot more internet penetration, even in 2016, which is going on across the country. The point is, can you actually leverage that to be able to take it to the nook and corners and make a bigger business? So from a founder perspective, the thought process was, does this guy have a vision of what he's doing? And what is his, thing in terms of staying in it for a longer term, right? And you will only get it once you're actually probing a little more, right? To be very frank, every investor might not even get the opportunity to talk as much to a founder. I'm being very frank, except in the early stages where you're able to do a few hours of conversation with the founder to be able to get an understanding of their vision of what they're really thinking about the company, right? So from Vidit Atreya's case, I think it was for us what he actually was thinking for the company from a vision perspective. I think he's also assertiveness, as well as he's a very strong personality. You'll think of him as a very soft guy if we actually talk to him, but he's a very strong personality. So you will actually be able to evaluate that when you talk to him and then say, hey, okay, and it's important. And that's one of the things, right? We all look at decks and we say, hey, let it be. But when you talk to the founder is where you actually realize very, very different things. So important, if you're getting an opportunity to listen to the founder, do so, because you'll be able to get better at evaluating the startup than just at the deck. I hope that somewhere gave you a sense, Vinayak. Apologies if it didn't.
Yeah, so I have a quick follow-up question. So, like, maybe you're going to talk about it, so tell me, that's okay if you want to cover it later. But I just wanted to understand the process. Right? Typically, like, you do the pitching, and then you have follow-up conversations. So, typically, how long does that process take? I understand it can be different for different startups.
Yeah.
Maybe can you talk about that process, like how you do the evaluation? Because I mean, pitching is, again, like, you might have 5 minutes. In some cases, you might have, like, maybe say half an hour, but maybe, as you rightly said, right, understanding their vision, understanding the market, maybe do you have like 2-3 conversations or many more conversations? What's like the typical process for evaluation in terms of a number of meetings or the metrics also a little bit? Yeah.
Sure. So this will, Gautam, if it's okay for me to take it right now, I will take it, unless you wanted to cover a couple.
No, absolutely. We can cover this,
Okay.
and then we'll get into the excellent questions.
Cool. Okay. So for us as Let's Venture itself, normally the first conversation would have been an hour. We don't do 5-minute conversations because it doesn't give us anything, right? And thereafter, when one particular team member is actually picking it up, they ensure that they study the market. They are able to understand what the competition is, the whole space, and then actually sit down with the company for another couple of hours, right? That's literally just at our end. That's all we do, to be frank, because at a scalability factor, we know that there is that limit for us as a company. But let me take this from two lenses, Vinayak, right? One is a lead investor, right? Somebody who's actually going to be either the first check writer or somebody who will validate the business and give the terms and the valuation for the company. He will normally end up spending a month or two with the company, right? Unless it's like growing like this, he'll say, okay, you know what, I'm just going to give the check, let's figure out afterwards, right? Because the company is able to showcase certain things really quickly, right? But if not, normally they at least take a month or so, because they also want to see, are the founders coachable? Are the founders hearing what I'm saying? How are they actually executing? What are the different things that they're doing? So you'll spend different amount of time for being able to get that conviction with the startup, right? But if you're somebody who's actually going to invest now, there is a lead investor and the terms are set, the round is getting completed, then you have much lesser time, which means you have to crunch everything. I have deals which close in an hour, which means you actually don't have time to evaluate. I'm being very frank, right? Which means you're just hearing the pitch. The pitch is half an hour. There is a half an hour Q&A, and people take that decision and close, right? But more often than not, you'll at least end up getting a couple of days or 3 days timeline before which you need to take that decision. Because if the company is really good, they keep getting inbound interest from a lot of investors, right? So in that timeline, you're able to do one understanding of the sector a little bit. You'll end up doing a little more research on the same, and then have the founders, if they are able to relate to you, they're open to having multiple conversations, right? And that's another key thing. There are founders who actually don't want to have conversations, to be very frank, because they say, hey, I don't want to be talking to every single investor. I just need my money in the bank. But more often than not, most of the good founders are completely open to talking to investors because they learn a lot from you as well, right? So that is another thing which you actually want to hear from a founder, that they're not doing it just because they're pitching with you, but they also get to hear certain things or questions from your end, because it helps them get better understanding of their own thing too. So
well, I think those are very important points. In fact, the last one in terms of openness of the founder to talk and also to take questions and take feedback. I think one thing I wanted to highlight was, in the last 6 to 9 months, we've been forced in a good way to take all founder meetings, at least the first couple of meetings, online, right? So I still remember before that, a lot of insistence used to happen. Even the demo days that we all used to do would all be physical and offline. But I think, in a way, good way, it's increased the number of meetings. But like you said, the decks don't do any justice, right? The 1 hour calls, the 1 hour meetings that we end up having with the founders make a huge difference, because the deck may be good, the founder may not have that much confidence the way probably the deck has, or vice versa. The deck may be really shoddy, but the founder comes with solid understanding of the space, which probably he's not good at making a deck, right? He's probably good at making the product. So I think that's a very important point for a lot of our folks as well, where keep listening to a lot of startups, keep attending these pitches, keep listening to a lot of startups. Probably first couple of months, just keep listening and absorbing to these pitches. Ask the right questions wherever you can, because it's a two-way learning. And like you said, it doesn't matter whether it's a single founder or a double or triple founders, because you end up, the intention is you end up adding a little more value than just the money as an angel. So beautifully said. I think those are very useful insight. One very burning question which we keep having on our group, right? So in fact, last weekend we had a bunch of pitches. So some of us caught up with we had follow-up meetings with startups that we're interested in. So one burning question from the group was, isn't the valuation too high for them, right? So I think that's a very burning question for all of us in terms of the first check that you write. what is the science of valuation, or is it not any science but more of an art? What is your perspective on valuation? What should it be? Are there multiples that you take a bet on in the first check?
So, like I said, there is no science, but there are certain things as an early stage investor we actually keep in mind, right? Some basic things is, hey, you know what? Okay, normally one, you shouldn't shortchange the company as well, right? We have seen enough companies give up, say, 30% or 40%, say, for 1 crore or 1.5 crores, which is screwing the company and screwing yourself for later stages as well, right? So in early stages, anywhere between, normally we say it's okay to be between, say, 10 to 25%, 10 to 20%, say, right? That's the dilution we normally tell founders, that, this is the percentage between which you need to be there. The point again is, how much is the company raising, right? And how long will this money last? Is it, and the company has to raise for a minimum of 12 months, right? Because it's important for us to understand that if the company raises for 6 months, he's out in the market in 3 months again, because the funding closure normally takes 3 months. Very few cases it gets done like this. 95% of the startups take 3 months to close around, which means you have 3 months to execute, showcase, and go in for your next round, which doesn't work. So minimum of 12-month runway is required. Now you will see, okay, what is the amount required for a 12-month runway, right? That is one part of it, based on which you'll then say, okay, what end of the spectrum do I need to be there, at the 10% or the 25%, right? Now, again, what happens? B2C companies always get higher valuations. Okay. B2B now is gaining a lot more interest in the market because of how things have played out, and it is becoming very heated up. But normally B2C always gets higher valuation. B2B is comparatively easier when you're actually, if in SaaS companies, you have your ARR, you'll say, hey, know what, there is a multiple on the ARR, right? Normally, Series A is a 5 to 7x. So which means at an early stage, you can give a slightly higher number. You will say it's okay to do anywhere between, say, a 12 to 20 kind of a number from a multiple perspective. Again, solid founders, if they're serial entrepreneurs, their valuation is a bump up there. It's always also dependent on the founder, right? So somebody who has experience or somebody who's a serial entrepreneur, you will give that amp on the same. But if not, this is normally a multiple on which you will actually work on, right? And on the other side, for a B2C company, actually very, very difficult. I'm being very frank. So you will work on this range to say, hey, you know what, am I giving, or rather I'm giving too much for too less, as also an important for the investor, right? Because if you don't get in at the right price, you will not make anything as an investor. It's not that you're going to make anything from most of the deals, but even if you are making, actually in some of the bets, you should have gone in a decent range, right? So what we end up seeing, just as a quick thing, is normally if it's a crore round, your valuation is sub 10 or 10, sub 10 predominantly, right? Anywhere between a 7 to 10 crores. If the company has shown decent amount of traction, this is for early stage, right? Decent amount of traction, it ends up going to 10, 12 to 15, right? 2 crore round, 20%, 20 crore at the most somewhere, right? Because beyond the 20 crore, it's gone into a next level where it becomes slightly more expensive for you as an investor. So founders always want higher valuation, and it's okay. They come with the hope that they will get really solid valuations, but it's okay to tell them that, boss, come down to the ground. You need to think of it realistically, right? Because even really large valuations, what they do is, if you don't have enough money, your next round might end up happening the same or lower valuation, which means in a market perception of anti-dilution, all of those kick. So like I said, I think from an early stage perspective, early stage transaction perspective, you will look at anywhere between, say, 7-8 crore to a 20-24 crore range, right? That's normally what you would see as a range. Like I said, if you're raising a crore, it is sub 10. If you're raising a couple of crores, it is 18, 15 to 20 crore valuation, because you also don't want to over dilute a company, right? Like I said, the moment we say, assume we're saying it's okay for the company to raise, say, 3 crores at 7 crores pre-money, he's giving up 30%, right? Now what happens is, assume, and for whatever reason they have to raise another bridge round before their Series A, the founder's stake will become dramatically less. we would have also told them, please put 10% ESOP, which means it's a total 40% dilution for the startup. The founders would be at 60%, right? And if there is another bridge which kind of cuts down another, say 10-15%, by the time before he goes to Series A, he's already at 50, right? So it's not a comfortable situation for the founder as well. Again, most Series A investors also want that when they invest, that after their investment, the founder should still have a 50% stake, right? So that's also another thing from our perspective which we need to look at. Can the founder have 51% post, say, 1 or 2 calculations as well? Will he still have 50-51%? It's not that every startup has. There are companies obviously which don't and are still doing phenomenally well. But the point is also that, most investors look at it. Series A guys actually drop off deals where they don't see a larger stake from a founder aspect, right? Because they feel that the founders are not incentivized enough. If he has very low stake, he doesn't have the incentive. Why will he do really well and make money for you when he can't make any money, right? So that also comes into picture.
I think that's a very important point, right? Because it is applicable to everyone here. That your angel round or your seed round that you're investing, you're cutting your first check, ensure that the dilution at no cost exceeds 20%, right? So the founder may choose to raise a smaller round where he dilutes only 7-10%, but the cap here is do not make him dilute more than 20%. Of course, I've also seen startups that have come and cried on how they've diluted 50% at their first check, and the unfortunate side of things is by the time the next round comes in, the founder also loses interest and he's already starting to think of his next startup, right? Because he is with hardly 25-30% left, there is that amount of comfort that he's lost because it's no longer his company. So that's something that we've seen where he's been wanting to exit for whatever reason. I think that's not what we want, right? We really want to be the investor. We don't want to take over a company and run it. So I think thank you so much for that. So I think just a final piece, a final question, Sunita, from you is, the strength of LV is also been in terms of powering a lot of syndicates, and I think LV has been probably one of the best in the country in that, in enabling syndicates as well. So we'll probably dive into that because we are at a phase where a lot of us in the investor circle have been attending these sessions. We've been learning. These learnings have either given us the hope that we are not fit for investing, or it's given us the learning that we should start investing. Both outcomes are what are important. Anyone who still doesn't know which side of the fence they depend, I think we've not done a good job. So I think what's been happening is a lot of them, about 15-20 of them, have been actively seeing deals as well from this larger group. Every month through Headstart's Kickstart, and we are at a phase where many of these deals are also pretty exciting for us. Some of them where just one person is interested, they would like to invest. That makes life for the startup very easy. Some of these where 5 of us are interested. Some of it where all 20 of us want to chip in and put in money. Because it's a very exciting startup, and of course the startup has come through Headstart, and they want Headstart to be a part of it. So they want all the 20 of them. What models would you suggest for the members here in these cases, right? And what are your 2 cents for them? Of course, I think we would also have to give them some idea on the model for syndicates, etc.
Got it. Yeah. So just in general as well, right? So when you're looking at syndication as a concept is one, and leading the syndicate is another concept, right? One is say, hey, what we as a group of Headstarters actually want to kind of co-invest in deals, or actually want to lead deals as well, right? So you look at it differently then. One, you're saying, hey, what, somebody else is leading a transaction. We as a group want to kind of invest behind this investor and invest behind the startup in particular transactions. The other is where we say, hey, what, we want to actually be leading. Some of us are going to invest. We are okay to get other people also to invest along with us, or is it purely going to be us, right? So you can actually look at it both ways. One is to say, hey, what, we are a Headstart group and it's going to be only us who will actually showcase it to our set of people. We're going to be completely private. We're going to be a private syndicate, and we will showcase the deals internally. We will, try and see if we can complete the round. And that's where, all the 20 of you coming into play will actually make sense, right? And the other part is in terms of saying, hey, you know what? Okay, we'll potentially lead. We are a lead syndicate. We will lead transactions. And we will say maybe do 20-30% of the round. And then from there on, we will look at other people also coming and backing us, right? But I think because all of you are starting off newly, normally as a group, you can actually say, hey, you know what, let me first, maybe in the first 3-4 transactions invest where there is also some other person who's leading the round, right? As a group, let's do that. And then over the next 4 or 5 months, because I think a lot of you are also entrepreneurs yourselves, because and that is an instinctive thing in terms of, hey, you know what are the mistakes did I make as a founder? You'll be able to evaluate startups much better, right? And you're in a much better position to actually lead transactions thereon as well, or somewhere where you have a solid understanding of a space, because you know their opportunities somewhere lie, and you're able to visualize that and say, I'm happy to lead that. So you could, over the next 3-4 months, say, hey, you know what, now we've done a few investments, we would want to start leading the round. And there could be one person or 3 people who are actually spearheading a transaction, so that you're also able to share load in terms of what is it that you can actually support the company on. And like I said, do it as a purely private thing, which is just your guys. Or you'll say, hey, what we did, say 1 crore of a 2 crore round, let's also help me with the rest of the syndication, right? Where you have a syndicate for head start and other people are actually backing deals which you guys are leading. So you could look at it in multiple aspects like this. But predominantly what also happens is, ideally, invest in a few, you're also able to showcase your credibility as investors, right? So today, if you look at people who are leading syndicates, there are 2-3 ways, which also came about much later in our syndication journey. We started syndicates in 2017. The concept then was purely from a perspective of, I'm an influencer in the market. I have done enough investments. I have a solid exit track record because of which somebody will back me, right? Interestingly, what we've also seen recently is we have a angel fund model, which is like for all practical purposes, assume it is a virtual SPV, right? So because it is a fund model, a lead investor can take a carry, right? So now a majority of people are also people who get allocations in, say, VC-led transactions, right? They are super solid scouts, right? They're able to get the best transactions in the market, which you might otherwise not be able to get. And they actually get a carry for the same. They say, hey, you know what, I wouldn't have got the deal without me. So you're actually going to back his syndicate because he's able to get access to transactions, right? So you also see that difference, right? One, in terms of people who are purely lead guys, who mostly will end up doing the whole transaction. Say, like, example, like say Anupam Mittal, right? He 99% of the times will do the whole round because he puts in a decent quantum. He puts in 10 to 30% of the round, and the rest of the things are actually syndicated by the rest of the people on the platform. So he does predominantly the whole round, right? There are other investors who get allocations in VC-led transactions, and people back him because of that aspect, right? So you will also, over course of time, everybody has a flavor of how things will play out, right? In terms of syndicates, we're also seeing a lot of alum groups coming up. So everybody wants to back their alums. That's a syndicate where I am a group of XYZ college alum, and I'm going to back all those kind of, the colleges which are founded by my alum guys, the companies that are founded by my alum guys. So you could look at different models, and based on how you folks want to actually take it from a long-term perspective, right? Like I said, start investing together first, and then maybe you can actually start creating your own lead syndicate because you would have done that for a few transactions. Helps you in terms of being able to showcase your own influence in the market as well. That helps, Gautam?
No, it does. I think it is important to introduce this concept, right? I think because a large part of folks still haven't gone into these kind of concepts because you don't work on these concepts on a day-to-day basis. Just even today in the ecosystem, it's just a few set of super angels who drive these, right? So it was very important. So one final thing to you, I think that was our main question, final question in the interest of time, Sunita. Before one googly question that I have for you, I also know that, it's been a very, very hectic week for you and a very hectic day. because tomorrow is Let's Venture's flagship event, Let's Ignite. Right. So maybe if you can take a minute and just tell us what to expect in tomorrow's event, because I think it could also be useful for some of us to attend.
Sure. So just because of what Let's Ignite is we created Let's Ignite as an investor conference, right? Normally, most of our conferences are startup focused. The thought process here was, can we have an investor conference where we are looking at things from an investor lens and create investor conversation space, right? And this is our first virtual event. So this tomorrow's session actually has two parts to it. One is where we're actually doing an angel investing masterclass from Anjali Bansal and Ashish Dave, who are, Avana Capital and Mire. Both are angel investors and both are VCs. That's why we thought it would be a good mix of giving both from an angel angle as well as a VC lens about how they evaluate startups and how they go about the overall process of sourcing, evaluation, portfolio management, the whole works, right? And the other focus from our end was also about getting more while I think all of you are new, we are also looking at getting a lot more women to start investing, right? Where there is an interest. The point is, can we get more access? Can we get more education to them to be able to get to start investing, right? Like I told you, we have 6,000 plus investors on the platform, and we would have maybe 20 plus women angel investors, right? So from that aspect, we also want to increase the number of people, number of women who are actually looking at investing. So there is a panel also on looking at women who want to invest in this particular space. How do they go about certain things, or why should they even look at it, right? Then the concentration. So this time we also thought we are actually splitting the event in 2 days. Tomorrow is one, next Saturday is another, right? This time, tomorrow's focus is on D2C. So we have Manu Chandra from Sauce, and we also have founders perspective. We have Sugar Cosmetics, Wakefit, and the Whole Truth guys, along with Manu, actually giving views on what angel investors also should look for when they're actually looking at D2C companies and the D2C endgame. And for all of you, there's another panel in terms of the face of the new angels. We're seeing a lot more of younger people who are coming into the fold, right? We used to predominantly see people who are at a different career stage used to start investing. Today, we're seeing much younger people actually taking that leap earlier in terms of investing, either because they're all been in the startup ecosystem, know and understand, and have that excitement to be able to do the investment. So we also wanted to bring a younger panel there. So that's another part. We have Zia Modi as a closing keynote, right? And actually, we also have one more part of Sequoia's GVR and Sakshi doing a segment on, the C2 IPO as their opening keynote. So
and it's always a pleasure to listen to GVR.
Yes.
So I think usually what we do with our investor circle sessions is, we also ask our speaker, is there a book that you would recommend that probably has impacted you that you would recommend to the rest of us? Probably, I'm sure you will say, Let's Ignite is the best book that you have at the moment. Just come and attend these sessions. But yeah, has there been a book that has really helped you or had an impact on you in the ecosystem in the last decade?
Something to be very frank, I have not read too many books in this particular space. There is enough going around me.
I'm sure you'll say, the decks are my books.
No, you won't believe it. I consciously try to stay away from books in this space because there's so much everywhere. Everybody is just talking about this space. I'm being very frank with you guys because
that's the time.
Yeah, 8 to 10 is only startups. I don't want to think startups after some time, but I'm happy to kind of also see what I can't think of anything. I'm being very frank. I can't think of anything where I can suggest reading, but I think there are some really exciting podcasts which are coming up. I think that is something which you should listen to. And people who are on Clubhouse, please. I think that's an interesting space as well, where people are talking of newer trends happening and what's happening world over as well, right? I think those are becoming more interesting now than just the books.
Absolutely. There's so many investment conversations on Clubhouse these days.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, Sunita. I think, very, very, very insightful session. I've thoroughly enjoyed the last 1 hour because I think, you were very candid. You made it seem very light and interesting. right? Because these are pretty intense topics, right, from your experience. And I think the best part was all that we discussed over the last 1 hour were all based on your experience. I think, theory, bookish stuff in this space will really do no good to us, right? So because it's investment, high risk, we learn things the hard way. It has to come from experience. So, thanking you once again for joining us. I know it's been a very hectic week, ahead of Let's Ignite tomorrow. And thank you for joining us, on a Friday evening. And I think thank you so much to all of you as well on a Friday evening, like what Sunita said. I'm sure a lot of you must have already retired for the week, right? And you chose to stay back. It's only because of your fire to learn and invest in startups. So thank you so much from me from Head Start. I've also added the link to a WhatsApp group, which is where all of us keep chatting. In case any of you were not aware or you were not on it, you can go ahead and join the group. This is where you will find a lot of crazy, investment conversations. Thank you so much, Sunita, and all the best for Let's Ignite. All of you who wish to, attend Let's Ignite tomorrow, you can probably, I think the best place is just dropping a message on the group itself, on the WhatsApp group. I'll connect you with Sunita's team, and you can reach out to them for the for the process of registering for the event.
Very short time, yes. No, so it's just sometimes what happens is, we also think there is a lot of webinar fatigue, to be very frank, but we try and make it as insightful as possible. And because it's online, you can switch it on and go walk around and still be able to listen to things. We just want to kind of get what really makes sense. Like I said, next week is SaaS and fintech. We know those are becoming hotter spaces. Trying to cover things which are going to help you in terms of being able to evaluate, right? Everything is going to be more pinpointed, not globe sessions. We also don't want to do the same. So, happy to see if you're interested. It will be great to have you folks on board. And like I said, thank you so much to listen to my blabber. I appreciate you coming.
That's Sunita at her best. You're being as candid as possible. Thank you so much, Sunita. It's always a pleasure, having you at Head Start.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thanks,
much,
everyone.
and have a good weekend.